All right. Now, just a moment or two on implementation. We're not going to go into a lot of details, but there are a lot of pieces to getting it done, including packaging it up, selling it, and telling the others about the vision and making them visualize the possibilities business-wise, and even, yes, if it requires city investment, why that's a good bet. There are also parts of implementation that have to do with getting the rules right. I talked a couple of weeks ago about having better DNA, so you grow good growth instead of growth you don't like. Some sketching and quick work has been done over the last few days to describe in storyboard format, just in concept, a different kind of land development regulation. In this case, an illustrated code as opposed to one of those abstract zoning maps that emphasizes design over emphasizing land use. So it's not just about what goes on in the building, but rather how do the buildings relate to their streets, and is organized not by zones but by streets. Because you heard that whole discussion about design for pedestrians. Joe and Jim took that hypothetical map, first draft, and then assigned different types of streets to each of the streets that you saw there. And as Jim described, it's not one size fits all. They're all quite different, and there would be designated on an official map a network of streets. That's a normal process. You have big, wide tracts of virtually vacant land, just like you're getting off a ship colonizing a new continent. You've got to settle it, and the way you settle it is you provide access to it and create addresses within it, and that's what the streets do. So yes, a network of streets. The key word is network, not grid. It might be bent, and it might be shaped and adjusted for topography or a great tree or a special opportunity. But nevertheless, it connects. And on top of that, as you work through the particulars of an individual site plan and implement this thing neighborhood by neighborhood, the plan will probably adjust a little bit. The streets would be there, but they would be allowed to move. So the code will be written not as a ironclad right-of-way set-aside in each case, but instead as a flexible tool the developers and the city would work on together, making site-specific, parcel by parcel. Now, once you do that, then you adopt a set of rules like setbacks versus build-to lines. Instead of the old setback, which says here's the line and you can be behind it wherever you want, the code could be more specific and say, put the front of the building here and orient it so that front door faces the street. And instead of being random in the end result, you can actually design coherent urban space. Some streets would have the buildings with their build-to lines set far apart, others set close to create the desired spatial effect. So you're actually guaranteeing the results even if it's built one building at a time or 100 buildings at a time. And there's some flexibility in that. Some streets could have a build-to range, allowing you to have some buildings that are set not quite all in perfect alignment, for example, but generally so that they shape public spaces the way you want them to be in the end. Oh, sorry. Gosh. Okay. Now, there's another revolutionary idea in that coding by street concept, and that is to merge the street standards and subdivision regulations with the land use and urban design regulations, so that the design of the streets you want could be according to a very specific palette of specifically defined and right-sized, dimensioned, locally acceptable street standards. That means you wouldn't have to build those streets that just seem too wide for real human habitat anymore because somebody in some manual said do it. You would have your locally adjusted set. Now, Jim has been testing all of these and verifying it. And that would be embedded into an illustrated graphic document, quite different from the normal text-only document in that, yes, it would have rules and numbers made as simple and few as possible, but it would also have diagrams and definitions so that normal mortals can understand how to read the land development regulations. And these are some examples of that kind of stuff. There would be, in addition to those street-by-street standards, some general provisions that address everything, again, heavily illustrated, and some architectural regulations to the extent you decide you want that get the basic grammar of buildings right. Some buildings, for example, could be required to have a feature like awnings or colonnades or arcades along a main street. that the design specifics of how you do those would be incorporated in the code. So the bottom line of that is you can do it. Now, Sean, if you could flip the lights, I'm going to tell folks about what happens next. First, the thing to walk out of here tonight with the understanding about is that it is still a draft, and there are still lots of choices to be made. We hope the images challenge you to think long-term about that and not accept second best. And to think that maybe taking a few extra weeks to get those details right is worth it, even in a place that craves development from the sales tax perspective. Build well or do not build yet should be your mantra. And to imagine that you're going to be building the places that you will not yourselves be the only users of. Your children and your children's children will inherit, and maybe a few visitors from Michigan. We're going to try an experiment in feedback here in order, not the audio kind of feedback, but in getting more information from you about how we're doing. The lights are coming up, and it takes a few minutes for them to warm up, but we've passed out in the last few minutes